Welcome back to the channel, my friends. As the year comes to a close and the veil between realities wears thin, we gather once more to delve into the darkest corners of human experience. Tonight, we explore 3 true New Year horror stories, tales of celebration turned sour, of joy overshadowed by unspeakable dread. These stories will make you think twice about celebrating the New Year alone. Lock your doors, turn off the lights, and prepare to be thoroughly spooked. Our first story takes us deep into the isolated wilderness, to a snow-covered cabin promising warmth and escape from the biting winter winds. A group of friends, eager to ring in the new year away from the hustle and bustle of city life, thought they had found the perfect getaway. Little did they know, the cabin held a dark secret, a history steeped in tragedy and despair, waiting to be reawakened.
The friends arrived with laughter and cheer, unpacking their bags filled with board games, party favors, and enough holiday spirits to last through the night. The fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced on the log walls. As the hours ticked by, we shared stories, played games, and toasted to the new year with youthful optimism.
But beneath the surface, a sense of unease began to creep in, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that sent shivers down their spines. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Strange noises in the night, floorboards creaking under unseen weight, whispers carried on the wind that seemed to pronounce their names with chilling familiarity.
One by one we began to experience unsettling occurrences. Fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures at the edge of our vision, a bone-chilling coldness that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the cabin. The once comforting isolation of our winter retreat now felt oppressive, suffocating, like an unseen entity was closing in on us.
One night, as a blizzard raged outside, blanketing the cabin in an eerie silence, the friends gathered around the fire, their faces pale with growing fear. They tried to rationalize the strange events, to explain away the growing sense of dread that had settled over them, but deep down they knew something was terribly wrong.
As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the entity that had haunted the cabin for years grew bolder, its presence impossible to ignore. The temperature plummeted, frost creeping across the windows as a guttural growl echoed through the cabin. The fire sputtered and died, plunging us into darkness.
Panicked, the friends huddled together, their breath catching in their throats as the terrifying realization dawned on them. They were trapped, at the mercy of something ancient and malevolent. A piercing scream shattered the silence as one of the friends, a young woman with eyes wide with terror, pointed to the corner of the room. There, emerging from the shadows, was a figure of unimaginable horror.
Its eyes, glowing with an unholy light, seemed to pierce our very souls, and its jagged teeth were bared in a grotesque grin. Chaos erupted as the entity lunged, its icy claws reaching for us. We scrambled back, desperate to escape the clutches of the nightmare that had invaded our sanctuary.
In the ensuing chaos, one of the friends, a young man fueled by adrenaline and fear, managed to grab a heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace. With a roar, he charged at the entity, swinging the poker with all his might. The iron connected with a sickening thud, but instead of the satisfying crunch of bone, the poker simply passed through the entity, sending a cold shiver down the young man's spine.
The entity let out an ear-splitting shriek, its form flickering and distorting as if in pain. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving behind only the echo of its chilling laughter and the lingering scent of decay. Shaken to our core, we huddled together until dawn, our eyes darting nervously in the shadows, our ears straining for any sign of the entity's return.
As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, the friends knew they couldn't stay in the cabin a moment longer. They packed their belongings with trembling hands, their faces etched with the horrors they had witnessed. They fled the cabin, never looking back, forever haunted by the memory of the New Year's Eve they spent with the entity that claimed the cabin as its own.
The cabin still stands today, a testament to the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most idyllic settings. Locals whisper tales of the haunted cabin, warning travelers to avoid its cursed grounds. But every New Year's Eve, as the clock strikes midnight, some say you can still hear the chilling laughter of the entity echoing through the trees, a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed.
Our second story takes place amidst the dazzling lights and bustling crowds of a bustling city on New Year's Eve. A young woman, Sarah, full of excitement for the night's festivities, found herself separated from her friends in the throngs of revelers. As the countdown to midnight began, she found herself alone, navigating the crowded streets, her heart pounding to the rhythm of the city.
The air crackled with anticipation, the streets awash in a kaleidoscope of lights and colors. Confetti rained down from the sky as strangers embraced, their cheers echoing through the night. But amidst the joyous chaos, a sense of unease began to creep into Sarah's heart.
A tall figure in a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured by the shadows, seemed to be following her, his presence a discordant note in the symphony of celebration. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes darting nervously over her shoulder. The figure, however, maintained his distance, his presence a constant, unsettling shadow in the periphery of her vision.
Sarah tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, attributing it to the heightened anxiety of being alone in a crowd. She ducked into a brightly lit storefront, hoping to lose herself in the throngs of shoppers browsing New Year's trinkets. But as she glanced out the window, her breath caught in her throat. The figure stood across the street, his gaze fixed intently on her, a chilling smile playing on his lips.
Terror clawed at Sarah's throat, her mind racing, her body flooded with adrenaline. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was in danger, that this man, whoever he was, posed a threat to her safety. She considered calling for help, but the words seemed to catch in her throat, her voice stolen by fear.
As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Sarah knew she couldn't stay in the store forever. She had to find her friends, to escape the chilling gaze of the man who seemed determined to follow her every move. Taking a deep breath, she plunged back into the crowd, her senses on high alert, her eyes scanning the throngs of people for any sign of her friends or the menacing figure who haunted her every step.
The countdown echoed through the streets, each number sending a fresh wave of panic through Sarah's body. She could feel the man's presence behind her, close enough to touch, his gaze burning into her back. As the clock struck 12, a wave of relief washed over her as she spotted her friends across the street, their faces illuminated by the fireworks exploding in the night sky.
She raised her hand to wave, to signal her presence, but before she could make contact, a hand clamped down on her arm, yanking her back into the shadows. Sarah screamed, her voice lost in the cacophony of celebration, her body trembling with terror as she came face to face with the man who had been stalking her. His grip tightened on her arm, his fingers like vices digging into her flesh.
His eyes, cold and calculating, held hers captive, reflecting the fireworks exploding in the night sky like twisted, malevolent stars. "Happy New Year, darling," he whispered, his voice a chilling rasp that sent shivers down her spine. "Let's celebrate, shall we?"
He dragged her down a side street, away from the crowds, away from the safety of the lights, into the darkness that seemed to welcome them like a familiar embrace. Sarah struggled against his grip, her mind racing, her heart pounding against her ribs like a captive bird. She had to escape, had to find a way out of this nightmare before it was too late.
As they reached the end of the alley, Sarah's captor pushed her against the wall, his body pressing against hers, trapping her in his suffocating embrace. Sarah's mind raced, searching for a way out, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But as the man leaned in close, his breath hot on her cheek, she realized with a sickening certainty that there would be no escape, no happy ending to this New Year's Eve horror.
Just when she felt all hope slipping away, a figure emerged from the shadows at the other end of the alley, silhouetted against the faint glow of the city lights. "Get away from her!" a voice boomed, strong and commanding, cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. The man holding Sarah captive turned, his attention momentarily diverted, his grip loosening just enough for Sarah to break free.
She shoved him away with all her might, her heart pounding in her chest, and stumbled back towards the figure who had come to her rescue. It was a police officer, his face stern, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. Relief washed over Sarah, so powerful it threatened to buckle her knees. She had escaped the clutches of her stalker, but the terror of that night, the chilling memory of his gaze, would forever be etched in her memory. Our final tale takes us to a lavish New Year's Eve party, hosted in a sprawling mansion overlooking the glittering cityscape. Music pulsed through the halls, laughter and conversation flowed as freely as the champagne. But as the night wore on, a sinister undercurrent began to pull at the edges of the revelry, a chilling mystery that would leave the guests forever scarred.
The party was in full swing, a kaleidoscope of sparkling gowns and tailored suits, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume, and the promise of a night filled with revelry and celebration. Guests mingled, their laughter echoing through the high-ceilinged rooms adorned with twinkling lights and festive decorations. But as the hours ticked by, a sense of unease began to settle over the party, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that went unnoticed by most.
It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, a guest excusing themselves to the restroom never to return. A group venturing out onto the balcony for some fresh air, vanishing without a trace. At first, their absences were attributed to the revelry, to guests losing track of time or simply slipping away unnoticed in the throngs of partygoers. But as the night wore on, and more guests disappeared without a word, a sense of dread began to creep in, whispering its way through the once jovial crowd.
The host, a charming socialite known for her extravagant parties, noticed the dwindling numbers, a knot of worry tightening in her stomach. What had started as a night of joyous celebration was slowly morphing into something sinister, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She made her way through the remaining guests, her smile strained, her eyes searching for any sign of her missing friends, her heart pounding with a growing sense of unease.
Whispers of the missing guests began to circulate through the party, growing louder, more insistent with each passing moment. Fear, like a contagious disease, spread through the crowd, transforming the once festive atmosphere into one of suspicion and paranoia. The host, determined to get to the bottom of the strange disappearances, decided to investigate. She gathered a small group of trusted friends, their faces etched with concern, and together they began to search the mansion, their footsteps echoing through the now eerily silent halls.
They checked every room, every nook and cranny, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. But their search yielded nothing but more questions. The missing guests had vanished without a trace, leaving behind no clues, no indication of where they had gone or what had happened to them. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the remaining guests gathered in the grand ballroom, their faces pale with fear, their eyes darting nervously around the room as if expecting something sinister to emerge from the shadows at any moment.
The host, her composure finally cracking, addressed the crowd, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to maintain a sense of calm.
"My friends," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I know you're all wondering what's happened tonight. I can assure you, I'm doing everything I can to find our missing guests."
Her words, however, did little to soothe the growing panic in the room. The guests, their faces etched with fear and suspicion, began to murmur amongst themselves, their whispers growing louder, more frantic with each passing moment. The host, realizing that the situation was spiraling out of control, decided to call the authorities. But before she could reach for the phone, the lights flickered and died, plunging the ballroom into darkness. Screams ripped through the darkness, the sound of shattering glass adding to the cacophony as panic seized the remaining guests.
The host, her heart pounding in her chest, stumbled back, bumping into a solid figure in the darkness. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. A cold hand clasped over her mouth, stifling her cry before it could escape her lips. A voice, low and menacing, whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, darling, the party's just getting started." And then everything went black.
When the authorities finally arrived at the mansion, drawn by reports of a disturbance, they found the ballroom empty, the only evidence of the party the scattered remnants of what had once been a lavish celebration. The missing guests were never found, their fates forever shrouded in mystery. Some whispered that they had stumbled upon a hidden portal, a gateway to another dimension, while others believed they had become victims of a malevolent entity that haunted the mansion's halls. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: the guests who disappeared from that fateful New Year's Eve party were never seen or heard from again. Thank you for joining us on this eerie journey. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more terrifying tales. The new year is a time for fresh starts, but also a time when we are most vulnerable to the things that go bump in the night. Remember these tales, and be careful who you celebrate with. Happy New Year, and stay safe out there. Sweet dreams.